Hi, I'm John McCabe, Managing Editor of the Intelligencer and Wheeling News Register, and this is our next installment of our Sunday Sit-Down. Joining us today is West Virginia University Athletics Director Oliver Luck. Mr. Luck, I want to thank you for taking some time for us today.
Good morning, John.
Well, let's get right to some questions here.
Sure.
Had a pretty interesting start to your career as Athletics Director at W.Va. Been time this area, should be on the job for about 8 months. In your opinion, what's the current state of athletics at West Virginia University?
I would say that if I did a State of the Union address after 7, 8 months in the job, I would say that things are solid here at the university within our athletic department. The business has changed dramatically, I think, over the last 20, 30 years, certainly since I was in school here as an undergraduate in the late 70s and early 80s. And I think our department has changed as a result. And I think we've got a lot of what I would call solid fundamentals, and we have a lot of very quality people. Certainly, we got some great coaches, within our 17 sports. But I think also there are constant challenges to our business because there's a lot of changes, and there's also some threats to the industry. And this is true of any business you're running. There's also threats, just like you have threats, in your industry. There's threats to our stability. And these are threats that just don't apply to us, but apply to really all intercollegiate athletic programs. So I think we're in good shape. If I gave us a grade, I'd give us maybe a B+ or so. But I do think, as with most businesses, there's plenty of room for improvement. There's plenty of things that we can do to make us stronger, to make us better able to resist those threats, or to repel those threats, if you will. So it's like most businesses, a constant daily battle, to make sure we're doing the right things and improving on the things that we do here. And that just doesn't mean winning more games or matches or meets or whatever it would be with the sports. It includes doing a better job of advising our student athletes academically, generating more revenue. We're in a sort of an arms race like every other school is to have the nicest facilities and the best coaches, and that all costs money. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we can never lose sight of the fact that we are the state's flagship university. We carry the West Virginia name when we go into a game, a match, etc. And that's very important. And despite all of the business things that we have to do on a daily basis, I think we also have to remember that ultimately our job is to represent the state and the university as well as we possibly can with our student athletes and our coaches.
You mentioned you think right now WVU Sports is at a B+. How do you bring that up to an A?
Well, what we try to do, and what I've started doing, over the last 7, 8 months, is really take a look at everything we do. How do we sell tickets? How do we sell sponsorships? How do we academically advise our student athletes? How do we, sort of orient them to the school when they show up on campus as a freshman? How do we recruit? What vendors are we using? So we're looking at literally everything that we do and trying to be methodical about it and make sure that we're delivering the best product that we possibly can. And that, again, just doesn't mean the performance on the volleyball court, but it means how we put together the volleyball program. How do we spend money on the volleyball program? Are we being as efficient as we possibly can? I'm a big believer in efficiency, and I'm a big believer in asking a lot of questions. And if you could spend time talking to my staff, you'll probably have them tell you that all I do is spend time asking questions. Why do we do it this way? How long have we done it this way? Is there a better way of doing this? Is there a more efficient way of doing this? What are our peer institutions doing? And those could be Virginia Tech or Pitt or Ohio State, because I think you can always learn from your neighbors, even though we're rivals. Certainly on the football field or basketball court or baseball diamond, at the end of the day, we're all in the same industry, and there's no reason we shouldn't be learning from the experiences that others have had. So I think really, to answer your question, it's kind of taking a methodical, comprehensive view of all the different things that we do to make sure that we are, if not best in class, that we are trying to approach best in class. And really that means understanding what is best in class in all these different facets of what our department does.
Okay. Again, you've been here for just a little shy of 8 months as we tape this. In that time frame, you've had to hire a new girls volleyball coach. You've had the NCAA coming in with some allegations about the football program. major conference realignment talks last year when all these super conferences were kind of starting to look like they were going to form. On top of that, you hired a football coach in waiting. Do you think you've had a lot on your plate? If you've really had a chance, I guess my question would be, do you think you've had a chance to really get a good grasp on everything? Did you expect to be so busy so soon after you started?
The short answer, I think, is yes. I did. And having served for a couple of years on the Board of Governors, I had a little bit of an insight into the department, how it's operated, what things were being operated very well, and where I thought we needed to make some changes. So, and I'm also, I guess it's in my DNA that if I take a new job, start a new position, I tend to do a lot of things quickly. If I look at something and say it can be better, I don't push it down to the bottom of the priority list. I try to actually improve it. And that some cases means changing personnel. In some cases it means changing the structure of how things are looking. So it has been busy. There's nothing. I'll give you an example. The first move that I had to make was with our volleyball coach, and this was in early July, which is shortly before the start of the volleyball season. But what drove me is the fact that I wanted to be able to say to myself that we were providing the best experience for our scholarship volleyball players that we possibly could. And I thought we could make an improvement over the previous coach, Veronica Hammersmith, who did a nice job over many years.
I think
3 decades,
years, yeah.
3+ decades.
Mm-hmm.
But I also realized that we needed more enthusiasm, more excitement. We needed more youth, to be very honest with you. The woman that I hired, Jill Kramer, I think did a phenomenal job in her first year. And she came in a difficult circumstance, obviously, but she's done a marvelous job. We hadn't beaten Pitt in volleyball since 1981, when I was a junior or senior, I forget now. And we beat Pitt under Jill's leadership and really put the team together. We hadn't beaten Marshall in 8 years. And Marshall's had a great volleyball program.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a very good coach down there, Mitch Jacobs, that's done a marvelous job. But we beat Marshall here in Morgantown. So I felt good about that move because I truly believe that we gave the volleyball players a better experience for that year. And I think that Jill's going to continue to build, and I think we can become a real powerhouse in volleyball. So I'm not able, it's just not in me to see something that's not working well and not change it. And that's, I think, what President Clements wanted me to do when he asked me to become the AD is go in there and be smart, be judicious, use your discretion. But if we can improve, then we need to improve. And I think that's an example of improvement, because as important as football is, and men's basketball, those are the sports that get the most attention and generate certainly the lion's share of the revenue, if not all the revenue.
Mm-hmm.
But the other 15 sports are equally as important, because those kids and coaches are working as hard as the football players or the basketball players, and they need to not only have a great experience, but to leave WVU with a diploma saying, that was fun, I enjoyed that, I like that university, that's something I can kind of stay attached to, and that's very important as well. So it has been a busy 7-8 months, but I think at the end of the day they're all things that really needed to be done, and I went ahead and did them.
Okay. You also come in at a time when the football program is coming off a nice run of success, kind of moved itself into the national conversation. Basketball program, again, right before you started, had a Final Four appearance. How much pressure do you feel now as the athletics director to continue that success, to keep that momentum going? This kind of seems like 2010-11 seems almost a transition year in both sports a little bit. How are you going to handle keeping West Virginia in the national conversation?
Well, I think, number one, it's extraordinarily important that we stay in the national conversation. We need to be bigger than we really are. We need the perception to be around the country that we are, a national program, that we can go out and recruit nationally, that we can compete against, the top schools, not just in our conference, but whether it's the SEC, the ACC, et cetera. So that's important. The basketball program, I think, is in great hands with Coach Huggins. We're not playing quite as well this year as we have in the past, but I think people understand that losing Butler and Ebanks was a tough thing. I mean, very few teams can kind of reload as I'm sure Bob would have liked to reload. We had some injury issues and all that, but I think we're in great shape in basketball for many reasons. One of which is the new basketball practice facility, which I think is going to be just a tremendous asset for both the men's and the women's team. You know, in this business, football is king. You know, whether we like it or not. I happen to like football. I love football. So, you know, but it is what drives, you know, the athletic department revenue, and we're no unique than any other school. We're really all in the same boat. So it's extraordinarily important as we go forward that, you know, we maintain, you know, not only the high expectations, but we achieve the high results that I think people expect in football. I tend to take a little bit of a historical approach and go back to, you know, the early days when Don Nealon arrived, and quite honestly, we weren't a very good football team. He made us a good football team, but, you know, we're not a national player. And, you know, under Coach Nealon's leadership and, you know, the new stadium, which I don't think people realize how important that was at the end of the day, in giving us a platform to be a national player. I'm not sure we could have become a national player had we still played 10 or 15 more years at Old Mountain Dew. As nice as the place was, you know, it didn't sort of say big time, you know, to others. So, you know, and Don brought us there. Coach Rodriguez, I thought, you know, did a great job of taking advantage of that, and we were playing at a very high level. You know, going into, you know, last regular season game, you know, fighting for a national championship. You know, I thought Coach Stu has done a good job. I really do. I think he's done a good job, you know, with his 3 years, and I'm sure he'll be, you know, very excited about the upcoming season. But I also think that we had to guard against kind of slipping back into, this is not a word, but I'll just make this up, regionalness. You know, to be just a local regional player. I think that would be damaging to our program. I sincerely believe that, and I think the obligation that we have, because we are the state's flagship institution, we carry the brand on our chest as we go into battle, you know, with various sports. I think that it's important that we really strive to be a national player and to be in the national conversation, and that means, you know, expanding our recruiting areas. It means, you know, responding to the demographic changes that we see within our region. You know, I grew up in Cleveland, and I can tell you that, you know, Cleveland is not producing the number of Division I football players that it did 30, 40 years ago. There's still some great talent coming out of Cleveland, just as is the great talent coming out of Pittsburgh, you know, and other places, but we don't have the numbers like we used to, and there's nothing we can do about it. But we have to realize that, you know, the fertile recruiting grounds are now Florida and Georgia and Texas and Oklahoma, and, you know, having lived down in that neck of the woods, I've seen that before my very eyes, how, you know, how much talent there is down there. So it's all about changing and being smart with the way you change, and looking for, you know, for opportunities maybe in some places that we historically hadn't looked for opportunities. You know, this year, just to give you a small example, and you never know how these recruits in any sport will ultimately pan out, because it's a big jump from being a high school star to, you know, to competing effectively in the Division I level in any sport. But, you know, this year we were able to take the Greater Houston Player of the Year out of Houston, coming to W.Va, really because of Coach Holgerson's connections down there and his knowledge of that space, if you will. This kid was took his team to the 5A state championship, which is the big school level in Texas. He was the MVP of the state championship game. As one of those kids that got overlooked a little bit in the shuffle, to show you how much talent there is down there. And he's coming to W.Va, so I don't think we can get 10 kids a year out of Texas, but we can get 2, 3, 4 a year, much like we did when we first started to recruit Florida. You know, so it's all about changing. Nothing stays the same. Everything changes constantly, and we have so much equity in this program. And you know, we do have, you know, great history, and we do have, I think, a lot of respect around the country that certainly Coach Nealon earned, and Coach Rodriguez and Coach Stu. That I think we need to continue that, and we need to set high expectations for that. And that's why we're, you know, going to continue to push forward, and all are, you know, pulling towards one goal, which is really winning a national championship.
I'm going to talk just for a minute about Coach Stewart. If you look back now, back to, say, November, when the news kind of started to leak out that that you were looking for a new coach and you had someone in mind possibly. Do you ever wish you handled that a little differently? I mean, right before the bowl game, don't really, we can't know for sure if it affected the players, but kind of a lackluster performance in the bowl game this year.
It was lackluster. You're right about that. Not sure what the cause was. I'll take responsibility.
Sure, but do you look back and wish that could have been handled maybe just a little differently, as far as maybe even just word getting out that there was a change?
Well, it's a very fair question, and the short answer is no. And the reason is simply this: that the way college football is structured, and the fact that 6-6 teams go to bowl games now routinely, because there's 5 bowl games, 34, I don't know what it is. There's no way, unfortunately, to do it smoothly. If you're going to make a coaching transition, by definition, because your team is still preparing for a bowl game, there's really no way to do it that where I think the casual observer would say, "Oh, that was handled well." I mean, look at our sort of neighbor schools, Maryland. They went through a pretty ugly, contentious sort of a coaching change with Coach Friedgen and now Coach Edsel. The Maryland kids were in turmoil. They ended up playing very well in their bowl game and won. Up the road, our friends at Pitt went through a pretty very ugly they won their bowl game as well, ironically, against an SEC team, Kentucky. But my point is this: there's no way to do this, and I think it would have been derelict if I say to myself, we need a change, right? We need a new offensive coordinator, which is what we did, and down the road a new head coach. I'm derelict, I think, in my duties if I don't proceed with dispatch, as they would say, early in the process. Because guess what? All the good coaches get gobbled up. There's very few coaches that are around after the bowl game, because most schools most ADs will do what I did, which is they'll decide on a course of action. They'll sort of scour the country. We all have our list of coaches that we think are the great up-and-coming coaches that have lots of potential, etc. We all hope we're right. Obviously, sometimes we are, sometimes we aren't. But I think it's negligent almost if one waits through the course of the bowl game, because the candidates just aren't there. They're quality coaches. They're great coaches at some of the smaller mid-major schools, but those coaches will get signed up. And I did not want to lose the opportunity to get a guy like Coach Holgerson, who I think is one of the great offensive minds, in the country, as a coordinator. I think will be a great head coach for us. But I didn't want to, run the risk of losing him. And I can guarantee you, had I started the process January 1st or whatever the bowl game was, or December 28th, not only would Coach Holgerson have been scooped up by somebody, because he had plenty of schools after him, 3 or 4 other coaches on my list would have been scooped up. So I'm not sure to be honest, I don't think any AD anymore can do anything that the outside observer would say, well, that was handled well, because of the structure of college football, which has 6-6 teams going to bowl games, and in many cases, and folks can certainly disagree with this, but in many cases, if you're a 6-6 team or a 7-5 team, your athletic director is going to be probably making a change, because that's and for many schools not acceptable to be 6-6 or 7-5, higher standards. So I think part of it is, and I'm not trying to push off any responsibility, I think part of it is just the structure of college football today, which is odd. I mean, there's no sport in the world that plays games on a more or less 1-a-week basis for 2.5, 3 months, and then takes 4 weeks off and does a final game. It's an issue that I think is going to become more prevalent as more and more teams go to bowl games, and there's more and more bowl games. So you have effectively mediocre teams at 6-6, that are going to bowl games, and you'll see more ADs making decisions that will leave you with the sort of situation you had at Pitt, at Maryland. All the talk at Michigan. I can't believe the Michigan players, were focused on the bowl game because they weren't sure what was going to happen to Coach Rodriguez. So I think, and if you look around at the bowl games, you saw many examples of that. And that's only going to increase because of the odd calendar that results from having these bowl games.
Do you think does it make sense, in your opinion, to have a playoff system for Division I college football?
bottom line is yes. I think that BCS has done one thing very well, and I have to give them credit, to be fair, is that they've matched up number 1 and number 2. As we all know, all of us who love college football for many, many years, you didn't have 1 versus 2 and all these arguments, etc. So they've done that. And that's really the goal of the BCS, is to have 1 versus 2. But I just don't think that there's a reason logically not to look at a reasonable, rational playoff system. They do it at Division II, they do it at Division III, they do it at Division I, W.Va. Those kids somehow handle their finals, they handle their academics very well. I don't think that W.Va students are any brighter than the Division I students. Every sport that the NCAA sponsors, except for Division I football, has the playoff system. That's an argument that you've heard before.
Sure.
So I really do think that the NCAA and the Bowls should look at that, because I think you could put together a system that also protects a lot of the great history that the Bowls have. And I do acknowledge that there's some great history, and they're important to the local communities. It's nice to go to a bowl game in Florida or California or Texas or wherever. But I also think there needs to be a better way to really determine who the national championship is. I operate under this premise of try to explain college football in the bowl system and how the national champion is determined to an intelligent sports fan, let's say a soccer fan from Germany, right? They understand sports. They're into their sports. They love their soccer and basketball and some of the other sports they do over there. But if you explain how the system works and that people vote on who's number 1, they would look at you, scratch their head, and say, "Gosh, these Americans are nuts." So I just don't think it holds up under intense scrutiny. And I would like nothing more than to see the NCAA and the the power conferences look at a system that would maintain the integrity of the bowls, if you will, but also look at a playoff system. If you think about it, the one bowl that matters is the national championship game. So the Champs Bowl, WVU playing NC State, or the Orange Bowl, Stanford playing Virginia Tech, the 2 bowls I attended this past year. Beyond local bragging rights and beyond wanting to win for your school, it didn't really mean anything. There's no, there was just no real significance of those games. And I think you're starting to see that, because a lot of the bowls had pretty poor attendance. A lot of the schools sat on thousands of unsold tickets, and we were able to actually make a small profit in our bowl game, but we cut back significantly on the cost of attending that bowl. In other words, how many people do we bring down there? How long do we stay at the bowl game? All those sorts of things that end up costing schools money. Most schools lose money on these bowl games. So I think we're getting to a point where there is going to be some pressure for the NCAA and the conferences to really look at a different system.
Okay, just a couple more questions, and we'll wrap things up. Let's talk real quick about the business of college sports. Here at WVU in the athletic department, you operate about a $60 million annual budget, which is larger than just about every city in the state of West Virginia when it comes to the operating budget. How do you balance, given that in the business model that you have to follow, how do you balance the role of the student athlete with ensuring that the business of college sports at West Virginia University is met adequately?
Well, there are a couple of things. Our $60 million number is a little bit misleading because we include capital costs in there. We'll go out and raise money through the Mountaineer Athletic Club, to build facilities like the basketball training facility, practice facility out here, or other things. So, if you looked at our more traditional operating expenses, it's less than the $60 million, but it's still a significant number, no question about it. I think that we need to be, on the one hand, very sort of hard-nosed to make sure that that we operate efficiently, that we're spending the money that we need to spend, but we're getting every value out of the dollar that we're spending in terms of all the things that we do. How teams travel, how we feed our players on the road, where we stay on the road, what tournaments we go to, all those sorts of things. We have to be very smart about that. We have to be very diligent about generating revenue. That means constantly changing things. We had a parking lot out here at the Coliseum. I'll give you a short example because I think it's illustrative of the challenges we face. We had a parking lot out here that was a public lot for free. You could park there for basketball, including men's basketball games. And I asked our staff, I said, who typically parks at this lot? And they said, well, we open it up 3 hours before the game, and the people who get there first. And I said, well, the people who get there first typically in the sports industry are, the security staff, the concession workers. And I said, do they park there? The answer was yes. Right. So we have our best parking that we've given free to folks who are literally working for us. So we changed that. Mm-hmm. We now park those folks off-site. We shuttle them over. We turned that lot into a paid parking lot, and I think over the course of the basketball season, we've generated $100,000 plus just from that relatively small parking lot. That money is needed, to pay for all the other things that we have going on here. So I think you have to, run on the one hand a very hard-nosed business, and it's important that we maintain our financial viability. On the other hand, though, we can never forget that at the end of the day, we need to treat our student athletes as well as we possibly can. So we need to give them the best coaches that we can possibly afford. We need to, put them in situations with facilities where they can achieve. We cannot afford to have subpar facilities. We can't afford to have a bad baseball field, because that's not being fair to that student athlete. So we need to travel relatively well, and on the road, eat well so that the parents feel comfortable that their kids are being treated well. So we have to be smart about the way we go about things. Thankfully, our coaches, I think, by and large, get that. They understand that. They've done, I think, a good job over the years of running good programs that are quality programs. That because you need that. You need that sort of buzz around your program, for recruiting and for everything else. And then but at the end of the day, we really cannot afford to forget that the student athlete needs to be the focus of what we do. We expect that student athlete to take his or her sport very seriously, and virtually all of them do. We expect them to take their academics seriously, and thankfully virtually all of them do. There's always some exceptions. But we do want them to have, again, that first-class experience where they can leave this university after 4 years or 5 years, ideally with a diploma. And our graduation rate is better than the student body's graduation rate here at W.Va. Where they leave this school and say, that was great, I really appreciate what W.Va did for me, because that's how you create quality graduates that go out and represent the university well.
What differences do you notice from your time here as a student athlete 30 years ago to today in how student athletes are treated? Is there any difference over that 30-year span?
Well, it was interesting. Garrett Ford, who's worked here for 44 years, a week or two ago announced that he was going to retire, which was no surprise. And he's 66 years old and has spent, virtually his entire life, outside of grade school and high school at WVU. I didn't realize this as I was reading his, biography. He started in the academic advising department. Well, he actually started the department back in 1978 when I was a freshman. And that's probably one of the things that's changed the most from my experience, is that we've got, computer labs, we've got tutors, we've got, an army of people that work with our, around about 500 student athletes on academics to make sure that they really have every opportunity that they need, to do well academically and to take tough courses, but understand that they've got help, with those courses. So that's one thing that's changed enormously. I mean, Garrett, I think, was a lone ranger during my 4 years in college, and I'm not sure at what point he ever got an assistant. But now we've got, all these computer labs, both at football here at the Coliseum, and really an army of people that are working with our student athletes. So that's encouraging. I think the student athlete experience has gotten better. I think, all the things associated with being a student athlete, your living conditions, your food, training table, all that stuff has gotten significantly better. There's no question about that. And that's a positive thing. The Mountaineer Athletic Club, which is our fundraising arm, it's part of the foundation, at the university, but it's really our athletics fundraising arm. They've gone from basically 0 to 60, in the 25, 30 years that I've been, gone from the university. Last year, I think they set a record, raised over $18 million. And I think as you look around, the facilities that we do have, and sometimes people take them for granted because they see them every day or come up for ball games. We've got some of the best facilities in the nation. It's encouraging, to hear from, for example, some of the new coaches, Coach Holgerson, and some of the assistants that he brought with him, that they look around and say, wow, this is awesome. We didn't realize that we had these great facilities. They don't have, for example, at Oklahoma State, where Holgerson was, they don't have an indoor practice facility.
Really?
And they walked into our Caperton indoor facility and said, wow, they're blown away. So that's great to hear, because I think it's obviously an affirmation that what we've been doing in terms of raising money, trying to be aggressive, putting these facilities together, not just for football but for all the sports, that we really are best in class in some of those. Of course, you can never rest on your laurels. There's always always more to do, but it is encouraging to hear from folks who haven't really spent time in Morgantown, when they come in, they realize how good our facilities are. So I think at the end of the day, the student experience has gotten better for student athletes. The amount of money that's being generated by these departments has gotten much bigger. The emphasis on fundraising has gotten much bigger. The attention paid to student athletes and to college sports because of the explosion in the media. I can remember being a senior here at W.Va. I think it may have been the first or second year that ESPN was in existence, and watching a college football game on cable, which was a brand new experience. Now of course there's how many college games on the typical Saturday.
Can't go at night without watching a game.
You can watch 24/7, and your eyes glaze over. So, and also the focus on the student athlete in terms of cell phones and cameras and all that sort of thing. It didn't exist when I was a student athlete. We went about campus without
Yeah, it's never a good thing when they're updating Facebook at halftime. Huh?
That's
something we experienced this year.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, things like that, or just being out socially and having your picture taken. And,
right.
My son experiences that, so I've got both professionally as well as personally, some anecdotes about how difficult that has become. I mean, it's still a great honor to be a student athlete. It's a great honor to get a scholarship to play whatever sport you're playing. But the media and the focus on the kids has changed, and focus on the coaches as well.
You mentioned your son Andrew Luck at Stanford, but he's as it looks as if the NFL lockout is going to happen. I mean, I know you've said that you're very comfortable with the choice he made. Any thoughts on where the NFL's heading and how that may affect him next year as he finishes up, or maybe looks to enter the draft?
Yeah, well, I hope by 2012 we'll have their labor dispute solved. I went through a strike in 1982 as an NFL player, and then I retired, quit right before the '87 season. One of the reasons I left, because I was finished with law school and had to take the bar exam and all that, but I left because there was a strike coming on, and you could sense it as a player. And that was the year they did the replacements and all that sort of stuff, which was a lousy year for anybody to play professional sport. I told Andrew, I said, listen, I don't have a crystal ball, but I have followed the NFL labor issue because I'm a vested union member, et cetera. And, it's my own economic interest to make sure that the union is representing the old players well. But anyway, I said the challenge this year, and nobody knows if this is going to happen or not, but the challenge this year is there's a strong likelihood that the preparation period that any rookie quarterback is going to have, any rookie player, but particularly a rookie quarterback, that preparation period is going to get abbreviated. It's going to get truncated. It's going to be short, which means no mini camps, potentially. We could lose 2-3 weeks of summer training camp. Believe me, veterans don't want to go to training camp. They're happy to lose 2 or 3 weeks, really. But for a rookie quarterback, not to have those mini camps, because you're locked out. You can't go visit with your coach to watch film. You can't do it. Not to have those mini camps, not to have a week or 2 or 3 of training camp, to miss potentially a preseason or 2 preseason games, brutal. I said, you got to keep in mind, Andrew, you're going to be going to the worst team if you're the number 1 pick. Be going to the worst team, the Panthers. Nothing against them, but the number 1 pick is always the worst team, right? Unless they've traded it. You're going to be going to the worst team. You're going to get a new head coach, new offensive coordinator. It's hard enough as a rookie quarterback to pick up a new system and play well, particularly when you're coming in. Sam Bradford did it marvelously this year, and he's a great kid, but he had a full preparation period. So I said, that's just something you have to keep in mind, that you may be facing that with the kids coming out this year, and it's tough. It's tough enough to be a rookie quarterback. Peyton Manning told Andrews that your first year is going to be a disaster anyway. It's just the nature of the beast, because they're going to throw everything in the kitchen sink at you, trying to rattle you, etc. So I don't know if that'll happen or not. I hope it doesn't, because I'm a NFL fan as well as I am a college fan, and would love to see them reach an agreement. But my sense is that it's going to be a pretty hostile negotiating, sort of attitude or atmosphere, I should say. And I think that's the case up till now. And there's no way they're going to get a deal done by March 3rd, which is the end of the CBA. March 4th, they lock out, and they'll still negotiate. But I could see this thing going through the summer and then missing, some of training camp and potentially a regular season game or two. And who knows? They could miss, a preseason game, and they could miss a regular season game or two. It's difficult to say. You never sort of know where these labor negotiations go. I will say that you've got two new leaders, right? Roger Goodell is going through his first labor negotiation. I know him well because I used to work for him. Very smart guy, but he's going through this for the first time. And you have a new union leader, Mr. Smith, who is a real union guy as opposed to Gene Upshaw, who was just a former player. And I think those are two guys that are going through this for the first time, and they've staked out their positions, and they're pretty far apart. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Hard to know.
Well, last question, and Big East Conference. How solid is the footing, particularly in football right now? Basketball is in a very, very strong conference in basketball. And in your opinion, the addition of TCU, how much of an impact is that going to make for the Big East future?
The addition of TCU gives us a much better footing. I sincerely feel TCU was a good football team. I mean, they finished second, I think, this year, right behind Auburn.
Yeah, they played Wisconsin really well.
Oh, they played Wisconsin very well. I watched that game. I happen to know their quarterback, Andy Dalton. He's a local Houston kid, grew up just down the street from us, and he and Andrew are pretty good buddies. And they just play good, solid, fundamentally sound football. They remind me a little bit of a Don Nehlen team. Not necessarily the best athletes, but boy, they really play well together. I think that the road to the Big East Championship beginning in 2012 is going to go through Fort Worth, because somebody's going to have to go down there, hopefully us, and win a game on the road at the end of the year, and to claim the Big East title. So that's helped us in football enormously. I also think that, clearly the Big East was down the last year or two. We finished the season without any teams in the top 25. But I also think that we hit sort of the bottom of the valley, and we're coming out of that cycle a little bit. And I think part of it was, we lost some pretty good coaches over the, sort of a 2, 3, 4 year period, with Petrino down at Louisville and Rich here. People may have strong feelings either way about Rich, but he got some great results in the field. Kelly at Cincinnati left to go to, so I think we lost some pretty good coaches. Jim Levitt, I think was a solid coach, and he got pushed out. Schiano all of a sudden was the hottest topic, at Rutgers for 3 or 4 years, and then he fell off the map. Sure, Rutgers did what Rutgers has done forever, which is play bad football. But I do think we've reached the bottom. I think things are coming up. I think Skip Holtz is a heck of a coach at South Florida. I think Doug Marrone up at Syracuse is doing a good job sort of rebuilding their program, and they were down for many, many years. I think this year with Stu as our head coach and Dana coaching the offense, we're going to be much more exciting, and I think that's going to continue. So I think we're in a good trajectory. I think Todd Graham's a good coach, and we know him here obviously because he was on Rich's staff, but Todd was a good hire for Pitt. So I think you'll see this conference kind of get back up, and I think, and I know that various ADs are saying to themselves, much like I said to myself, gosh, if we're going to have to beat TCU, we got to pick our game up, because this is a good team. Now they're going to, they won't be as strong next year. They had a senior laden class, and their quarterback leaves and all that, but they're still going to be a top 10, I would think, top 10 team going into the season this year, and who knows where they're going to be in 2012. But it's a good program, so I think everybody realized that every team needed to upgrade its talent pool, its coaching, etc., to be able to compete against TCU. But I think the Big East football conference is going to get better. The presidents have given the commissioner authority to go get a 10th team. Villanova has been mulling over whether they want to go to Division I for a number of years now, and we should have an answer by this spring. There's some other candidates out there. I think some quality schools. So I think that we're headed in the right direction. We still have some improvement to do, but I think we're headed in the right direction. but there's still this threat that's out there.
Mhm.
And you can talk about it forever because it's really a fascinating topic. But there is this threat of major college football realignment and what that could mean to us. The crazy thing is nobody knows if or when it's ever going to happen. There's no timetable for
Mhm.
it, and that's one of the reasons I think that people are frustrated because they look at college football, which is more popular than it's ever been. TV ratings, tickets sold, sponsorship, all the sort of the objective metrics. It's more popular than it's ever been. But you have this multi-billion-dollar industry with no CEO. The conference commissioners only care about their individual conferences, and they just sort of poach each other. But there's nobody that's sort of taking the the big picture view of how we can move the sport from where it is, another notch or two higher. And that filters down into a lot of things like the bowl system and the lack of a playoff and how the schedule that a football team has and how that affects what ADs have to do occasionally, which is move coaches around. So that's the one sort of glaring weakness that I see coming from the private sector is you have this massively popular industry, but there's really nobody guiding it. There's no board of directors or a CEO, and I think that's one of the challenges that the sport is facing as it goes into the future.
Okay, well, Mr. Luck, thank you very much for your time, and appreciated the opportunity to speak with you today.
My pleasure. Thanks for coming out.